Hi, guys. Welcome to Threads Podcast, Life Unfiltered. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are here with Marcy from Andy's Mom's Podcast, right?
Yeah, it's actually called Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom.
Always
Oh,
Andy's
okay.
mom.
All
Love
right.
it.
But my website is just andysmom.com. So
That's right. I got that confused. I was looking for the website earlier. I'm like, is it alwaysandysmom.com?
Well, if you put in alwaysandysmom.com, it will get there too. We got both
really?
of them, so
Nice.
it'll bounce. But it just seemed like Andy's mom was a little bit easier.
Right. So, well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is going to be kind of a deep podcast. I like I was telling you earlier that I've listened to 5 episodes and it's been a little teary.
Can I correct you a little bit?
What?
It's not we've listened to 5 episodes. It's you've listened to 5 episodes. I
Well-
listened to the first one.
Oh, okay.
Well, I told
Well,
them.
the first one was the most popular, that's for
Yes.
sure. But
Right.
I would like people to listen to everyone if they can.
Oh, I plan to. I'm kind of hooked after episode 1.
Yeah, I mean, I actually needed to take a break from it. I'm not going to lie. Because, like, I listen to, I like MMA, so I listen to fighter podcasts and I listen to, comedian podcasts. And but I like, when I listen to something and I want to know about it, I start binging it. And then I'm like, after like the second episode, I'm like, I need a break. Like, I need a break to laugh a little bit and stuff. So.
Yeah. Mine has some laughter, but
Oh,
not
yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, well,
Not a lot.
it's not a comedic podcast. I
No,
let you know.
No,
So
it's not.
Well, Threads is an opportunity for Jason and I and our guests when we have them on to just talk about life and the highs, the lows, the valleys, the mountains, and everything in between. And Marcy and her family have certainly been through a pretty deep valley. And I'm just so grateful that you're willing to come on and share your story with us. And
I've been describing it as it's that we're on sort of a roller coaster. So there are still highs and lows, but the roller coaster is based in a valley. So
yes.
So sometimes when you get to those high parts of the roller coaster, you really can see out, but then you kind of go back down again. So
you
That's
can't hear
always how I
anything
think
in your
about it.
headphones, can you?
not a thing.
Oh, I just realizing that.
Oh, there
Sorry.
it is.
Hey,
I'm
look
sorry.
at that.
Now I can.
Producer Jason over here.
Yes.
I'm like looking at the thing. I'm like, wait, she's number 3, and it's
And she
completely
can't
off.
hear.
I apologize.
You played that off really
You could
well.
have just said
I-
something.
yes,
we
I
are,
did.
We are not that. Yeah.
We're pretty loose.
If it happens, I'll be like, all right.
One of my episodes, the sound was really terrible, and I told her before we started, I said, if you just can't hear me, you just keep going. Just,
Oh, really?
just keep going, because I was recording myself just on my own computer, so
Okay.
it was better that way, and so
Sure.
she just kind of played along a little bit sometimes.
One of
I
the
really couldn't hear you.
Yeah, the last podcast we did, I think on GRI, I went to the bathroom. Like we were live and everything. I'm like, I can't take it anymore. So I'm glad you said something.
Yeah.
Or I figured it
Well,
out.
I'm glad you figured it
Right,
out. Like,
right.
I was thinking, should I say something? Should I not
Yeah.
say something? I don't know.
So, but yeah, that's a really good analogy. A roller coaster in a valley.
Yep.
So, man, I guess we'll just kind of jump right into it.
Yeah.
So we'll transition into the first segment of our interview. We just
Sure.
wanted to take some time to get to know you.
Yeah.
And find out a little bit more about your background, what you do for work, all that fun stuff. So you want to give us a quick bio?
Sure. I moved around a lot when I was a kid, actually. My dad managed lumber yards,
Oh,
and
fun.
he just moved around a ton. So I lived in Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, and then I'm back to Iowa again. So overall, I feel like I'm an Iowa girl. I spent most of my life there. I went to college at Luther College, which is a small Christian school in the northeast corner of Iowa.
Okay.
And then I went to medical school at the University of Iowa. That's where I met my husband, Eric. And I decided to do pediatrics, to go into pediatrics. The reason, someone asked me that just recently, why I chose pediatrics. And between your first and second year of medical school, I did this thing called MECO, where you did a week in many different subspecialties. And I got to my week of pediatrics, and I never wanted it to end. It was like, this is it for me. I just love taking care of kids and taking care of families.
Yeah, my wife, she is a NICU nurse, and same thing. She fell into love with that when she kind of did a little they do they try each
Yeah.
mother baby and
Yeah,
whatever. And she's like, yep, this is for me.
I know it's really nice when that can happen, when you just know exactly what the right thing is.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And then I met my husband there, and he's originally from Michigan, from
Okay.
Okemos, East Lansing area. And so that's why we ended up coming back here, because he wanted to move back home to Michigan. So we
Sure.
ended up in Grand Rapids.
It's a good place to live.
It is.
I
love-
really do love it here.
I
I
love
do.
this city.
Although, I have a ton of patients that are from Iowa, because our Iowans tend to stick together a little bit. So I feel like every Iowan who moves to Grand Rapids ends up having me as their pediatrician.
That's funny.
It's all right.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it, actually. And
Very
a few
cool.
more Hawkeye fans. So.
Oh yeah.
Boo.
I am the non-sports fan. So.
I mean, I used to be into sports, but I'm just like, I don't have time anymore. Like
Well,
2 podcasts, 3 kids, full-time job. You're like, nope, don't
Yeah.
have time to watch the Lions lose.
Yes.
my Vikings beat the Lions today. So that
Oh,
was a good
yeah.
win. Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah.
That text come up.
Yep. Well, what do you like to do for fun in your spare time? Do pediatricians have spare time?
Well, we do have some spare time. I love playing board games, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
fun.
my husband and I like to do that. We have a friend that we often play with. Actually, last night we played with 2 other couples of that lost children. So it was like this
man.
bereaved, parents game night, which people might think is kind of weird, but we find it great.
Well, you have a common thread.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
Yeah.
Thread.
Oh, nice one.
good.
Together, so it feels more comfortable. And
Yeah.
then if you do have a time where you're not feeling up to it and some tears come down, they're like, yeah, we get it.
Well, I think the big thing is other people just feel so awkward around us
Yes.
for a long time, because do we bring Andy up? Do we not bring him up? What do we do? They just kind of treat us differently. And so to be with people that you don't have to do that with, I can talk about Andy. I did talk about Andy. I think all of our children were talked about last night in some way, shape, or form, and no one felt weird about it.
Yeah.
Because it was just normal.
Yeah. That's good.
So that was nice.
I do in some of your episodes. I remember you really talking about that with one of your interview or your guests, that you were just upset the way some people were treating you, like just this weirdness.
It's just weird. And I totally get it. I
Yeah.
get that it's weird. And I know I felt that way before. It's
Yeah.
just, afterwards, it's just different. Things are different now. But I love talking about Andy. So
Yeah, so why don't we kind of dive into that? Why you started this podcast? Maybe Andy's story a little bit.
Sure.
I
Sure.
know it, but our
but a lot of-
listeners don't.
Yeah, you don't. So Andy was our middle child, 14 years old at the time. So we had a 16-year-old, 14-year-old, 12-year-old. And just to tell you a little bit about Andy, he was a great kid. He was very, very musical. So he sang and was a head chorister, actually, for the Grand Rapids Choir of Men and Boys. He had a beautiful voice. If you listen to my podcast, if you listen to the very, very end, you
Yep.
can always hear Andy singing.
Yeah,
'cause
that
I
was like
had
a
one of
Christmas
his solos.
concert.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. He had a solo of the last verse of Away in a Manger. So that was cool. But anyway, he was a really kind of sensitive kid, emotional kid. He's the one I worried about most because he was always anxious. But, he was a joy, and he had the highest highs and the lowest lows. I think his favorite phrase was, "Mom, I'm so excited." He was always excited about something, always telling me about something. So last August, August 15th of 2018, we were on our way to a minor league baseball game, the Whitecaps, here in town. And we were traveling along 131 in the exit lane, which if you're local here, you know how that gets very backed up and slowed down for those Whitecaps games.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
You're like barely moving. And we were barely moving. Maybe 5-10 mile an hour. And a woman wasn't paying attention, I guess, and was traveling at highway speeds and hit us, rear-ended us.
Wow.
And Andy was killed instantly. I lost consciousness. Peter was along, our 12-year-old. So we were in our minivan. Eric was driving. I was in the passenger seat. Peter was behind Eric, and Andy was behind me. And I passed out. Eric stayed conscious, actually. He's an anesthesiologist. So he pulled Andy out of the seat. Peter came to, saw him pull him out of the seat. He tried to resuscitate him for quite some time. And I think he said he never really thought he would die, because that's his job, is to get people back and to not let people die. And he thought he could do it, but, he couldn't. So I kind of came to a little bit into it and saw everything happening. And then we were told in an ambulance right there at the side of the road that he had not survived. So, and obviously that was just horrific. I feel like everything crashed around me, that life was never going to be the same again. And it was a huge struggle. We went to our first support group with Starlight Ministries here in town, which is a great Christian organization for bereaved people, not just bereaved parents, but widows and widowers, and really focuses on children a lot, on taking care of like siblings and kids who have lost their parents. So anyway, we went there just, I think, 2 or 3 weeks after Andy died. I think 3 weeks after Andy died, and started getting support that way. And that was really wonderful. It really was. At first, I didn't want to be there. I didn't feel like I should be there. I think I was still like in denial, thinking this is not happening. I'm just going to go home and Andy's going to be there and it's all going to be fine. But, we started going and kept going regularly and got to know some of these families really well and got that support. And then, and then I started talking to other people, and they just don't really get it. They don't want to be around you that much. They just want you to be okay. I mean, everybody just wants you to be okay, and you're just not okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay that I'm not okay. I mean, it's fine. You know what I mean?
It's so hard, that balance. I mean, there's just this expectation, as you say, that, to be okay. But what if you're not? People just aren't comfortable with not being okay. And it's hard for us to really show up for people like that.
Would you rather have people just, and probably you're still experiencing it now, just act normal, or just call a spade a spade?
I think just call a spade a little bit.
Like, I know you're probably feeling crappy. I'm really sorry, but let's just do it. Let's just do what we need to do.
And I think that the acknowledgement is really huge, actually. And to not try to make me feel better.
Right.
Because I have that too. Recently, my son had to have some blood work done, and just kind of a routine. And he went in and they were drawing his blood. And the woman was just trying to be light, and saying, what grade are you in? And just, trying to make him feel comfortable, because obviously having a kid getting their blood drawn, they're not comfortable, right?
No.
Yeah.
And so then she asked, how many siblings do you have?
Oh, man.
How many brothers and sisters do you have? Which, I hate the question, how many kids do you have, too? Because how do you answer that? You don't really want to go into it.
Sure.
But so anyway, he decided, you could tell he thought about it for a second, and then he said, I have one sister. And we're just going to let it go. I was going to let it go. Everyone's going to let it go. And she goes, well, you don't sound too happy about that. And I'm sure thinking that he didn't like his sister. And that's why he had paused and had this awkwardness when he said one sister. But of course, that wasn't why.
Yeah. Right.
And then he starts crying. And then I feel like, well, now I need to tell her why he's crying. So I said, well, he actually had a brother too, and he died last year in a car accident. Oh, I'm so sorry. Which is a totally appropriate thing to say. Then she's awkward. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't know what to do. And then as we're getting up to leave, then she said, well, you've got to look on the bright side.
Oh, what?
That
What
just
does
made
that
it
mean?
10 times worse.
I was like, that's really interesting. What exactly is that? No,
Yeah.
there really isn't a bright side. But again, she wanted to say something to try to make us feel better.
Right.
Because I think she thought she had made us feel worse, which she really didn't. I mean, Peter did start crying, but the question made him emotional. He
Yeah.
was just trying to get past it.
Yeah.
And then when she made that comment, then he teared up. But we're sad baseline. So she didn't need to try to make us feel better.
Right.
And say something, which was just a stupid thing to say, really.
Yes.
But, just either continue to say nothing, which is fine, or to say, I'm so sorry, I'll be thinking about you, I'm sorry, ask something a little bit, just acknowledging that it's hard instead of trying to cheer us up.
Yeah, just say what it is.
Yeah.
This is really crappy, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. Like that would have been totally great for her to say. But instead she felt this obligation, like she had to try to make things better.
Right.
And I think people do that. I have family members that will even like really try to make me feel better. And like, oh, just please say, I know that sucks.
Yeah. And it's okay to say that. It's okay that I'm not okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I faced, now my experience is, I feel like the loss I endured when my wife and I had the 3 foster kids that we were intending on adopting. They were siblings. That loss, though significant, I feel like it pales in comparison to yours.
I think that's a really significant loss, though, and I don't like anyone belittling their losses, because that was a huge loss.
It was.
You had those kids that you cared for.
You'd
been raising them. How long had you had them?
We had them for 2, almost 3 years, and we had changed their names with permission of the court system. We had enrolled them in school under their new names. Like, we had given them a new identity.
Right.
Our foster son came to us with super long hair, hadn't been cut. I mean, the kids were a mess. I mean,
and just not having been cared for.
No. And so we did everything we could, and we made them part of our family. I mean, we took them. We were living in Oregon at the time, and we took them to Michigan to visit family, and our family treated them as if they were family. And so when the Oregon Supreme Court decided to hear the biological parents' appeal, and not only hear it, but grant them their rights back, it was like the entire rug was just pulled out from under our feet.
Yeah.
And we had so many people. I was working in a church at the time, and so many people were trying to be helpful. But the things they would say were not helpful.
No.
Don't tell me that God has a plan.
Oh, I know.
I get it.
I know. And I know that too, but I hated that too.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine just got diagnosed with cancer, and she was, writing to me, thanking me for some stuff, and then said, well, my husband would say this is all in God's plan. And I said, well, this bereaved mother says sometimes God's plan sucks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. And I can say that and still feel confident in my Christianity.
Right.
And say that I don't feel great about God's plan right now. And I know it's God's plan. And I know there can be good things coming from it. And honestly, my podcast is a good thing coming from Andy's death.
Yeah. I mean, the people that you're reaching.
It still sucks.
Absolutely.
And I still wouldn't change this for Andy any day, right? I would take him back in a second.
Oh, yeah.
No kidding.
Regardless of God's plan, you're like,
yeah.
If someone could said, I can do this, be like, okay,
yeah,
where do I sign?
Let's do it. I'm giving up the stuff,
Yeah. So for me, I really identify with what you're saying. The most impactful people in that time were the people that just showed up and sat with us.
Yes.
The people that brought us food, because it's so hard to do anything normal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, man.
Did you get to have contact with those kids then afterwards?
No.
Really?
No.
And that's what I've had other people reach out. I had a mother say, I had 3 miscarriages, but it's nothing compared to you. And I wrote back to her and I said, you're right. You didn't lose a child. You lost 3. Yeah. Because you had 3 children that you loved and cared for, and they were taken away from you, and you had dreams for them. Yeah. And just like you. I mean, they may not have physically died, but in your life, they were taken away from you, and they're just gone.
They are. It's like an unresolved grief.
Yeah. I mean, that's an absolute grief and horrible suffering, and it shouldn't be, you shouldn't think of it as less than what other people have gone through or than what I have gone through, because that's just tragic and horrible too.
Yeah. So I feel you. There's so many people that try to offer those, Christianese platitudes, and it's like
God doesn't give you more than you can handle.
Yeah, right. Actually, he does.
I feel like those are all valid, but
I know they're valid.
How about 3 or 4 years down the road?
Right.
Not 6 months in, or not when that happened,
Right
you go
away.
to church
I
and
mean,
you're like,
right away they'll do that.
Oh,
They'll
yeah.
say, I mean, at the visitation,
oh,
God doesn't give you more than you can handle. This is all in God's plan. This was another one that I loved. Not really. is the you'll be able to reach so many people in Andy's funeral. Like Andy
What?
hasn't even had his funeral.
Right?
that's
And-
bizarre.
And there and then right after the funeral, that was such a God. I mean, you were really worshiping God in that funeral, and I could feel God there. And I'm sure so many hearts were touched, and people will come to Christ. Like, you know what? I don't care.
Yeah.
Right in that moment, I do not care. If people are brought to Christ, great. But you know what? There was another way to bring them to Christ and not have my son die.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So those were the things that kind of irked me a little bit and bothered me. But that being said, I couldn't have gotten through any of this without my Christian faith.
Oh,
Yes.
None of it.
Yeah.
Right? None of it. If I thought that I would never see Andy again, I don't know how I would go on. I really don't. And I wonder how parents that don't have faith, that don't have that thought that they will be able to see their child again, I don't know how they do it. Because
Yeah.
that just, I can't imagine that. I love the fact that I know I'll see him.
Mm-hmm. Such hope and reassurance in that.
Yes.
so
Yes.
let's kind of talk about Andy. Like, what was he into? I
Oh,
know
yeah.
Again, I know soccer.
Yeah, he
you
loved
know,
soccer.
but,
He
like,
did. He loved soccer. He loved singing. I mean, those were the things. He was an awesome teammate. Not like usually the best kid on the team at all. And in fact, most of his teams, he just was sitting on the sidelines, never really got to start unless a lot of people were gone. But he was a great teammate because he was always there supporting the other kids and always wanting to be a cheerleader. And what was so awesome is he had just made the JV team for the West Michigan Aviation Academy where he was going to be a freshman. And he had the best 2 weeks of practice of his life. I mean, he was doing great. And I remember he was named a starter right before he died. Like the day before he died, he was named starter on that team,
Wow.
named starting left striker. And he said, because he'd been making goals with his left foot. And I remember telling him,
It's a big deal.
okay, buddy, you better go home and start practicing with that left foot because your coach thinks you can make those all the time. and I knew
Was he
couldn't
right-handed?
make those all the time. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
Right-handed, right-footed. He's never made goals with his left foot. I mean, I really feel like God was giving him that gift
Yeah.
to make him be so good there. Because
Yeah.
we, thanked the coach for having him on the team or whatever. And he was like, no, he was awesome. He was doing great. And he, that first day they had some tryouts and they had a couple days of tryouts. And I remember him getting in the car and saying, Mom, I know I made the team. I mean, like there was no question in his mind. And on the way that day, he was like, I'm never going to make the team. I'm not going to make the team. I'm not good enough to make the team. He was, and then we had to go through his Bible verse, which was "Be still and know that I am God." That's
Psalm
always
46:10.
Yeah,
Love it.
he loves that Bible verse, and we would always say it in this very specific way. We would say, "Be still and know that I am God," and then the next time we'd say it, "Be still and know that I am." So we take one word away every time and say it all the way through until the last time you say it, it's just be. And that would always calm him down and get rid of his anxiety once he got to the just be. So we did that like that day before that tryout to calm him down. And there would be other times when he'd call me upset on the phone or something. And I'd be like, do your Bible verse, buddy. Because I knew that would always calm him. But anyway, love soccer. And so that was such a thrill to get to start that team. He just got his uniform the day before. Actually, the picture we had in his obituary was him in that uniform.
Oh man.
Only
Perfect.
one we ever took of him in that. So that was cool. And then he was an amazing vocalist. He was so talented that way, and sang for the Grand Rapids Choir of Men and Boys. He's on a couple of the CDs. He's even got a solo part in one of them.
Wow.
Which, yeah, that was cool. We had those CDs playing at the visitation, and now I'm really gonna get emotional because when we went to see his body for the first time in the funeral home. They had the music playing, and it was at the time of his solo. So he was singing his solo part.
Oh, man.
As we saw him.
How perfect.
It was really perfect timing, to be on that song, which was his favorite. It was the Miserere, which they sang every year in their Lenten concert. And he got to sing the solo part the last 2 years.
Oh, amazing.
Of his choir life. So, anyway, I haven't told that story to anyone.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Just my family knows that because my family was all there.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Now I'm going to try to take a breath.
Yeah,
here.
just take some,
all right.
take some time, take some space. Oh.
So anyway, that's just some stuff about Andy. He was a great kid. We miss him terribly. Yeah, and he was such a gel in our family. He just was the energy. He's just an energetic kid and so excited, loved everything, loved life. So it does feel like a huge hole.
Yeah.
When you have that person that just loved everybody unconditionally and just your family just made your family gel. And he kind of did that. And so we just feel like there's a huge hole now. I mean, I love my other kids tremendously. I just was interviewing someone who said that the best piece of advice she got was from someone whose brother or sister had died, and the parents had never really recovered. And he said to her, you need to make sure that their surviving kids know that they are enough.
Yeah.
And that was really powerful to me too, to be very intentional about making sure that Kathryn and Peter know that they are enough.
Yeah.
And, that even though Andy is gone and we miss him terribly, they still have full lives ahead of them.
Yeah.
That I am there to support them still 100%.
How is Peter doing? I know from the podcast they were like two peas in a pod. Those
They
two,
were.
so
They were.
it's gotta be.
been a struggle for him, for sure. This year, I think a little worse almost than last.
Really?
And they say that happens oftentimes with kids, that they try to stay so tough and strong for their parents while their parents are doing poorly. And then once the parents start to feel a little bit better, then they let those emotions go. I think back to Peter on the night that Andy died, and we had to be the ones to actually tell him, although he knew. I mean, he had seen them. He had been watching from the road, seeing everybody working on him. So I knew he probably knew Andy was dead. But then we had to tell him, and I started just sobbing, and he immediately reached out and started rubbing my arm and starting comforting me and saying,
man.
it's going to be okay. And so he's just been like that he so wants to be good and not be a bother, which I think is common too for kids, to feel like they just don't want to bug their parents and they just want to be good. And I think he's trying to get all perfect grades and all perfect everything. But this year I feel like things have been a little bit harder. He's in 8th grade now. That's the last year Andy had lived. So he's getting close to his age. He's about his height now. It's just a little bit tougher. Soccer this year, for the first time, was not enjoyable for him until recently. I feel like the last 2 weeks we've turned things around a little bit and made some progress. He actually even wanted to quit, and I knew he didn't really, because he loved soccer too. But the boys used to play in the backyard together every single day.
Wow.
Every day. And now he won't go out. I mean,
No.
he just will go to soccer practice. And like I said, for a while he even wanted to quit. I think now it's starting to be a little fun again, but I didn't really want him to quit because I don't want him to just stay at home and play video games all the time.
Yeah.
I think you want him to still be active, and it's something he was really pretty good at. He was always a better soccer player than Andy was. And when Andy was alive and made that JV soccer team, we thought, well, someday Andy will go to varsity, right? And Peter was going to join him at the Aviation Academy 2 years after Andy went. So he said he was just practicing like crazy. Peter was constantly. And I said, well, buddy, maybe you can make varsity when you're a sophomore and Andy's a senior and you can both play on the same team because they've never gotten to play on the same team,
Oh,
of
wow.
course, right? Because they always play with your age group.
Yep.
And Peter's response was, Mom, I want to make varsity when I'm a freshman. Because he wanted to play with his brother 2 years.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where after Andy died, he's like, I don't even know if I want to play. So, yeah.
You think he's feeling guilty? Just like like going on.
I think it's just hard,
Yeah.
right? Because his brother was so fun. I mean, always, and honestly, why did they go outside every day to practice soccer? Because Andy took him out.
Wow.
You know, Andy was the one to be like, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And he just doesn't have that anymore. So I think the fun and joy in his life is just not there like it was. But in other ways, I now see Peter a little bit more
Yeah.
because he used to just do everything Andy did. Right? Andy played soccer, Peter played soccer. Andy joined the choir, Peter joined the choir. Andy was in Cub Scouts, Peter went to Cub Scouts. He never did anything, just him. And now having Andy gone, we kind of can see a little more of just who Peter is without Peter just feeling like he just wanted to be his brother, you
Yeah.
know? So that's a little bit of a silver lining, I guess, to see that. And I certainly hope that he gets through this rough patch, and I know he will. He's still seeing a therapist and stuff every few weeks.
Good.
And, yeah. And then Kathryn, you know, it was tough on her too, because she had talked to Andy for the last 2 years about him coming to the Aviation Academy. She told all her friends about Andy. I mean, she just was so excited to have him come into school with her and being able to, you know, show him off to her friends, and then to have that not happen was horrible.
Yeah.
And it was so, you know, it was all over the news, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
I mean, the CEO of the school that they were going to spoke. When Andy had his funeral, like the whole soccer team came, and it was a big deal at the school. They didn't have their his funeral was on their first day of school. I should preface that. And so a lot of the kids went to his funeral during that first day of school, including the whole soccer team in their full soccer uniform. And so it was hard for Kathryn too, because everybody knew, right? She's that kid.
Yeah.
She's the girl whose brother died.
Right.
Wow.
So that's hard to have to be so much of an outsider that way.
Sure.
You know, I was somewhere, I was like at a gym going to do a workout, and Kathryn was there with me, and a kid from her school came in, and the trainer said, "Oh, do you know Kathryn Larson?" And she was like out of earshot, and I was right there, but he didn't say I was her mom. And the kid goes, "Oh yeah, she's the one who," and then of course the trainer like cut him off because he knew it was going to be the one who had the brother die,
Yeah.
because that's just, I think, how she was known,
Right.
you know, which is not cool.
I mean, that will fade.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm sure
will.
it
For
probably
sure
already
will.
has a little bit.
Yeah, and I always feel bad about that too, because I mean, I didn't say this about my past. I said I moved around a lot, but in high school, my parents both got cancer, and then right after, so it was my sophomore year and junior year. My sophomore year, my mom got cancer. My junior year, my dad got cancer, and so I was always known as like the kid whose parents had cancer, which was totally not great either.
Yeah.
And then right after I graduated, my mom was diagnosed with her recurrence, and then she died when I was in college. So, you know, I've been through a bunch anyway,
Yeah.
even growing up. So that's one thing I didn't want for my kids, though. I didn't want them to be thought of as the kid who, you know, and like I knew that I was. So
Yeah.
So that's been a little bit hard.
So you talked about going to therapy, and that's one thing that we focus a lot on in this podcast is we both see therapists regularly. I had a pretty terrible childhood. So I'm still it reared its ugly head today before church.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm still dealing with it. And so we make a joke that we bring guests on that we always peer pressure them to go to therapy.
Oh, I'm already in therapy.
I know, I know.
So we're good there. You
Yeah.
don't even need to pressure me.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, man.
So did you go to therapy before Andy passed, or is this something that you took on?
You know, I did not. I mean, I did when my mother died.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a good thing to talk about because I went to a therapist. I was in college, so I went to a therapist at their therapy center place, and my college roommate's mother had died as well. She was much younger when her mother died, but you know, it was something that we certainly had in common, still in common today. And she would say to me when I'd come back from that therapist, she'd say, "You're worse every time you come back." And you know what? I did
Oh.
not like my therapist very much. She
Oh.
always wanted me to draw. I don't
really?
draw. I'm a
Oh.
scientist. Like, I do not draw. I do not like drawing. I do not have any ability to draw. And so I was like, when she said that, I was like, yeah, you're right. I am.
It's not working.
This is not working.
Right.
So I stopped going to her and I started going to one of our campus pastors who also did counseling. And you know what? I felt better. Every time I saw her,
Good.
I would feel better.
Right.
And so I tell my patients that all the time when I send them to a therapist. Like, if this first one does not
Yes.
fit with you, that's fine.
So
Bail.
You can leave and find someone else because
Yep.
it is really important to have a good relationship with your therapist. And just because they are a therapist doesn't mean they are the right therapist for you.
Yes.
I'm sure this woman was great for people who like to draw out their feelings. That was not me.
Right?
I just couldn't stand it.
That's okay. Yeah.
And that is okay. So, anyway, I always like to point that out because I talk to patients about that constantly about, you know, if you don't like your therapist, just get a new one.
We do the same thing. It's so important to find someone you click with.
Exactly.
But my wife struggled. She was having someone that she didn't click with, and she was struggling to go to another one. She's like, "Because I don't want to tell the story again." I'm like, "Well, you're just going to have to do it because
Yeah.
this isn't working.
No. Yeah.
Why waste your time and money if it's not working?"
if it's not working?
Yeah.
I found myself in that spot as well.
Yeah.
I was referred to a psychologist with rave reviews and it just didn't click.
Yeah.
And it was so hard. Like I would leave there and I'd have little homework assignments and I would complete them and I'd show up to the next week. And eventually he's just like, "Well, I think we're good here. Call me when you need me." And I'm just like, "Hold up.
Okay.
You're just going to dismiss me and send me on my way?" Like, I don't even feel like we got to anything deep beyond the presenting issues. I mean, you're a doctor. If somebody comes in with a list of symptoms, you're going to figure out what's causing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like the only work we did was dealing with the symptoms that were presenting themselves, but didn't really get to the heart or the root of what's causing you to feel this way.
Well, I feel like he was a billion years old, and I think he was just riding the lightning until the end. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, he had trained with Albert Ellis, so
Okay.
he's the founder of CBT, cognitive
Behavioral therapy. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he was probably in his 80s. I mean,
Yeah.
he knew his stuff, which is great, but I don't feel like he had the, I don't know if you call it bedside manner,
Yeah.
but just
Well, not relatable. and-
yeah, it was just this curmudgeon-y old guy kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's not good.
So
Yeah,
needless
and
to
my
say,
daughter went to 2 therapists after Andy died too, because she went to the first one and just didn't feel comfortable
Yeah.
with her. Just didn't. And I was like, try to open up, you know. And then I went with her one time, and then the therapist was like, thought I was saying too much, and like, well, she won't say anything. So, but it ended up we just cut ties and went somewhere else, and she loved the new therapist.
yeah, I mean, you
quite a
do have
bit,
to give it
so-
the old college try. You can't
Oh,
do
yeah.
3 and be like, "Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
like it."
right,
But
done.
by 6 or 7, if you're not moving a little bit, it's time to.
Yeah, it's time to just find someone else and find someone that you know, feel a little better after. And my therapist, I think, is doing a great job. I feel like things are going much better than they were, you know, and certainly than I was a year ago. But I didn't start right away going to therapy after Andy died.
Which makes sense, I think.
Well, yes and no. I mean, we went to somebody like, you know, my office. Of course, they're all what I didn't say either is we were on our way to the Whitecaps baseball game, and it was for a work event, for
Oh.
my work event.
Yep,
So
yep.
all of my coworkers were there at the game, like most of them. And when I called to say we had been in an accident and Andy had died, they all got in their cars and drove to the hospital. And they all were in the Spectrum Health waiting room and came in groups to see me. And so it was devastating for my entire office, right? We're a family.
Yeah.
And so immediately, like the next day, they get us all into therapy. Everyone, like Eric and I were seeing a therapist, which it was just weird. I mean, we were just like a day or two out.
Right.
It was not. And then Eric was like, yeah, that was not good. So like, we're not making another appointment. And so then I didn't go back to any other appointment either. And I think about 5 weeks after Andy died, I thought I could go back to work, which was just stupid. But, Eric had gone back to work and he thought it was a good distraction for him and it was helpful for him. And he was like, you need to get out of the house. And I did feel like I needed to get out of the house,
Sure.
right? I mean, I would find myself just going in Andy's room and laying on the floor and sobbing. Like, that's not good. And the kids were at school and he was at work and I was just alone. So I got to go back. So I did. And I feel like had I gone to a therapist first, they would have said, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Like, I think maybe you're not ready to go care for families and kids when you
Right.
just lost your kid. And I wasn't. I mean, I wasn't. There were triggers almost every patient, right?
I can imagine.
I mean, I see a kid, he's wearing a Michigan State shirt,
Sure.
which we have season tickets for Michigan State basketball. So, Andy was a Spartan through and through. So, anyway, that just killed me anytime it's talking about soccer or seeing a little baby boy or a family with 3 kids or anything.
Yeah, no kidding.
Just everything just was setting me off. And I think I did okay in the room with the patients, but between every patient I cried.
Oh.
Every patient. I would
Wow.
leave the room and start crying. And then it just got crazy. I mean, I just couldn't do it.
Emotionally
I just couldn't do
exhausted.
it. I was just emotionally exhausted. And so then we decided, yep, we're done. So I hadn't gone back. And I am going back here in a couple weeks now, but it took a lot of work
Sure.
and a lot of time with a therapist.
No kidding.
Afterwards. So I had been given the same name of a therapist by 3 different people. And I finally was like, okay, if 3 different people have told me the same name, maybe this is the therapist I should go to.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, she's been great. And really helpful to me. And what was cool is that I called her and she said, I heard your story and I'd been praying for you and praying that you would call. So,
Wow.
I mean, it really felt like it was a God thing for sure, right? She had prayed for me to call. 3 people told me her name, and then I finally called. And it was 2-3 months after Andy died.
Okay.
And then that's when I really kind of realized how much of a journey this would be,
Yeah.
and how much time it would take to
Yeah.
really be able to get back, to be able to get your focus on some other things.
Sure.
Because you just, they talk about having a grief brain, and you just have grief brain that you just can't think of anything. And it's similar to what you just said a little bit ago when, when those kids were
Yeah.
taken from you, you just can't do anything.
Yeah.
It's just this grief brain that you're like, I just can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I had a woman in one of my support groups say I couldn't follow a recipe,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you just can't do anything. So
Yeah, it was hard. 6 months after the kids left, I ended up losing my job at the church. And I don't want to
Wow.
blame it on the kids leaving, but I was in grief brain.
Yeah.
And I was in therapy, but not consistently.
right.
I was trying to just hold everything together.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. And things started slipping at the church, the youth group I was leading. It was really unfortunate, just a whole series of events. And it was a very broken time in my life.
Absolutely.
But yeah, just that feeling of I can't do life right now.
Right.
And yeah, it was the hardest thing to, rise above from.
Right. And that's when you feel that guilt too, when people say things like, God can't give you more than you can handle, because you feel like this is more than I can
Yeah.
handle. It really is more than I can handle. I need help. I can't do this. And you do and need help. And I guess in some ways it sort of isn't more than you can handle, because you do get through it.
I mean,
And I have
logically,
moved
yeah.
on, but and not moved on. That's a really bad term too. I hate that term.
I hear
You
ya.
move forward, you don't really move on. But
Yep.
but anyway, yeah, I don't know what I was even saying now. I'm losing track.
That's okay. I know. One thing I want to circle back, and I remember listening about it, is that picture. I know we kind
Yeah.
of jumped ahead, but can we talk about that a little bit? Because
Sure.
that was pretty powerful.
I know. So Andy was about 7.
Oh, so this is quite a while ago. then.
Oh, long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So 8 years ago now. I had gone to pick him up from school, so he was in probably about the first grade, and he was very excitedly telling me about this picture that he had drawn of the family. And he was telling me, in the car, it's one of those really big sheets of paper, the white paper, where they put
Yeah.
the sun up in the corner, and the big tree that just looks poofy, like almost a cloud of, green. And every kid had to draw their family. And so he drew his family, and I go around the car to open up the minivan door to unbuckle his seatbelt from his booster seat. And there he unrolls the picture and thrusts it out at me for me to look at. And I look at the picture, and there are 4 people in the picture. And there are 5 people in our family.
Right?
And so I thought, who did he leave out? And I'm kind of a little bit disgusted. Did
Yeah.
he leave out his sister? Did he leave out his
Right.
brother?
You're offended.
Who the heck did he
Yeah.
leave out?
No kidding.
Yeah, because he should be drawing all 5 of us. And I said, honey, there's only 4 people in the picture. Who's in the picture? And he said, well, that's you and Dad and Katie and Peter. And I said, well, why aren't you in the picture? And
Yeah.
he said, because, Mommy, I'm not going to grow up all the way. I'm in heaven.
Wow.
Yeah. And I immediately cried out to God in my head, please, God, no. Because I couldn't handle the thought of him not growing up all the way. But that's exactly what happened. He did grow up part way,
Yeah.
but not all the way. And he was so fine with it. And I was so thrown off by that whole thing. I mean, I didn't keep the picture. I got rid of it pretty quickly. I told several of my friends about it because I was so bothered by it, because it seemed so real to me. And it just seemed like it was going to happen. And it just scared me that it would happen. And that night when Andy did die, that's, one of the first things that Eric and I said to each other was, remember the picture, which of course, we did, because, he knew.
Yeah.
And I think it was a little bit of a gift from God, to him, to give him a little insight, and to me, to know that he was fine. He was totally, totally fine with going to heaven and leaving early. And I was not fine with it.
Yeah.
But
How
he
can you be?
was.
Yeah.
But he was.
Wow.
And actually, even a few weeks before he died, he was doing a carpool on his way to choir practice. And they somehow got on the subject of talking about heaven. And we had been studying in our Bible study Revelation. And Andy was like so excited about heaven because he thought heaven was going to be amazingly awesome. And this boy that was in choir with him, Charlie, felt very uncomfortable ever talking about death. His mom said he just didn't like to talk about it, didn't like to think about it, nothing. And Andy was saying to him, Charlie, are you excited to go to heaven? Heaven is going to be awesome. Heaven is going to be amazing. He's like going on about it. And Charlie's mom said, she told me this after Andy died. She said, I thought to myself, wow, I wish I had faith like that. Because he was just like excited to go to
Genuinely
heaven.
excited.
And like,
Wow.
yeah, genuinely excited to go to heaven. And that was also a gift to me, for her to be able to tell me that
Yeah.
had kind of just happened. And he was thrilled at the idea of going to heaven. you know?
So now that this has happened, you can reflect back on that. Because at the
Yeah.
time, you're probably like, oh, he's...
You know what?
hap-
She did not tell me until after he
Okay.
passed.
Yeah.
Because it didn't really, mean a lot to
Right.
her, really.
Yeah.
It
He's
wasn't
like, oh,
worth...
he's in love with Jesus. That's
I
cool.
know,
It's amazing.
That's
like,
cool
but
for
it's,
him.
It's
And it
kinda
was like, oh, I bet I should have a better relationship, It was just that. Yeah, and just told me afterwards. And it was, I'm just telling all these kind of God stories. So there's one more that I can tell you
Awesome.
is that so when Andy died, Kathryn was not with us. She had a violin lesson that night. She didn't want to go to the Whitecaps game. And so she was going to just drive herself to the violin lesson because she was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was at home herself, and then this all happened. And so we called, one of the first people we called was our pastor. And so we have, a senior pastor and junior pastor, and the younger pastor then ended up being kind of sent to go to our house to get Kathryn and to tell Kathryn, which I hate that we had to do that to him,
Sure.
but somebody had to go get
Right.
her and tell her, and it seemed like the best choice. So anyway, he was traveling. I don't know if he was going home or what he was doing, but he ended up having to turn that and come straight to our house. And so he called his wife, and his wife, they have 2 little boys themselves, and the one was taking a bath or a shower or something. And I think in the shower, and she was helping him. And then he sent a text just saying that Andy had died and that he had to go get Kathryn and that he was going to be a while, right? He wasn't going to be coming home. And she got very emotional, of course, went out of the bathroom for a second to try to get herself together.
Yeah.
Then came back in to her little boy, Sam, and said, okay, bud, let's get you all dried off and whatever. And he just looked at her and said, what did he say? Mommy, he's in heaven with his friends. No, he's in heaven with his friends, Mom. That's what he said. He's in heaven with his friends, Mom. And she said, who is, honey? Because, of course, he didn't see the text
Yeah.
or know anything. There was no conversation. Just, he's in heaven with his friends, Mom. And she asked him who, and he said, oh, I don't know his name. And so, I mean, to have that given... that was minutes after Andy died. Minutes. And then to have this little 3-year-old say that just out of the blue.
Yeah.
You just know God gave him that.
What reassurance.
Yeah.
Wow.
Chills. Oh, man.
I know.
I feel guilty having you on because, you're going through this. It's
I
know.
Don't at all. Don't at all.
I know, but it's I feel like we're causing you pain.
No. I tell people all the time. My baseline is pretty sad, and then, but I love being able to tell about this. I do, and and then I have to tell stories, great God stories like this. When I say things like God's plan sucks, right?
Right.
I mean,
Got to bring it all around.
I do need to bring it around. I can't just end it on that bad thing because God's done some pretty great things to help support us too.
So good. So you've touched on a little bit about how the pastor had to go pick up sister.
Yeah.
How have Andy's siblings kind of experienced all of this? I mean, what has their life been like? You've hinted at the visit to the nurse and that sort of thing, but how are they doing?
Yeah, they're doing okay. I mean, I talked about Peter, I think, and his struggles this year. But I think slowly we're all sort of making some progress and improving. I mean, I think I did say that Peter certainly had a little bit of a backslide, I think, this year.
Sure.
But Kathryn, I think, is moving forward. She's getting ready to go to college.
Yeah.
Which that's tough. It's tough for me to think about her going away to college. I have another bereaved mom that we both have seniors, and she said, I think it's because the only way we've ever lost a child and had to say goodbye to a child was to saying goodbye to them permanently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is not, obviously, so it's not nearly as hard, but we just don't know that. We don't know just like a normal, just sending them off to college kind of thing. So
Where's she gonna go, or where does she want to go? Michigan State.
Princeton.
What?
I know. So I don't know that she'll actually go to Princeton, but that is the dream right now.
Wow.
So we will see.
Yeah, man.
How about Michigan?
Yeah, how about Michigan? Yeah,
Nice.
she may go to Michigan. I think that's what Dad's rooting for sure. A
Well,
lot,
Michigan's
lot
a great
cheaper,
school.
and yes, and it's a great school.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yes. So I think we're all kind of hoping that that ends up happening, not Princeton, but we'll see.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, what encouragement would you give to somebody who has a friend or a family member who's grieving?
Yeah. I mean, the big things I like to talk about are still talking about the loved one that's lost, and whether that's a child, if someone's adult child, if they're a spouse, any kind of loss, just keep talking about them, because that shows us that you care. And like I'd said before, just acknowledging that things are hard
Yeah.
and not just trying to cheer people up. And then one other thing that you had said is about just doing stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is just going and doing things and helping out. That is really big. Just being there, being present.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah.
ask, just do it.
Don't ask, just do it.
Yeah.
Eric had talked with someone, quite a long time ago, whose son had died. And they had mentioned, he's like, it's my neighbor. I don't know what to do. I always used to see the son out mowing the lawn. And Eric said, go mow their lawn.
Mm.
Because think about how hard that's going to be, right? How hard would that be to go out and mow the lawn when that was your son's job?
Yeah.
Was to mow that lawn. And if somebody just came over and just did it, and now it's done, but you didn't have to do it, that's huge.
Yes.
That is so big, right? My neighbor noticed, I'm sure, that I didn't plant any flowers this year, which is unusual for me because I always plant a ton of flowers. And she brought flowers over to set at least on the front step.
Yeah.
And that was really big,
That's perfect.
because I just couldn't do it, because Andy always did it with me. He always helped pick out the flowers, always had to have the same kind because he never wanted anything changed. It
Sure.
would always be the same.
Sure.
And so for me, going to that flower store and planting flowers was just too hard this year. So my, flowers, there was just a patch of weeds, which is not good. But, at least my neighbor gave me a little bit of color.
Yeah. There you go.
And that was just doing something, just being there. So
Yeah.
I just think that's just so big.
It
It's you don't have to say a lot. And a lot of times the people that said, I just don't have any words for you, I'm so sorry, that's the best thing anyone could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't be
Best
awkward
thing.
like the lady drawing blood. I mean, because
Yeah.
it turned into a terrible thing to say. Did you just look back and go, just
No.
sigh?
I just said nothing.
You
I just said nothing. Because you do have to just give people grace,
Yeah.
because people do say really stupid things.
Yeah. It's true.
There are a lot of stupid things said, and you just need to give grace to that, and you need to give yourself a little bit of grace too.
Yeah.
That if you get mad, okay, I'm giving myself grace, I'm giving them grace, I'm just spreading the grace, basically. But it is better, I think, if you end up saying something wrong than just avoiding them, right? And the best thing is to just show up and just be there. And it's second best is probably saying something even if it's the wrong thing. And the
'Cause at
thing
least
to
you're
avoid,
trying.
because at least you're trying,
Right.
Yes.
right? And that's what I
Exactly.
feel like with the blood drawing woman, with the phlebotomist. I think, she was trying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give her some grace for that, for trying. But the worst thing is when people just end up disappearing. I mean, that's hard. And I know it's because they just feel so awkward and they don't know
Yeah.
what to do. And, and it's hard. It's hard to be around people who are sad.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think there's no training for that.
No.
You know what I mean? Like you
No.
can't just, you don't go to a class yeah, when you're involved with it, yes, you go to all these support groups and stuff. But in the meantime, your parents don't teach you okay, if someone that had a friend pass away, this is how, there's no teaching.
No.
Yeah.
And so I think people they don't know what to do. you know.
I mean, that is a huge reason I'm doing the podcast.
Okay,
too.
yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I'm doing it for grieving families, but I'm also doing it for people that care for grieving families or
Yes.
just don't know what to do, because there isn't a script for this
No.
at all. And what it falls on, and it falls on the griever to educate people around them. So I have to educate my friends and say, this is what I need.
Yep.
This is what you need to do for me. And that is hard to do.
Mhm.
So I felt like, and I've had so many awkward things happening with people that I felt like, you know what? They just don't get it.
Right.
People just don't get it. And that's what ultimately made me decide to do the podcast. Because I had so many people that just didn't get it
Right.
talking to me. And I thought, I need to help people get it a little. And I can use this to help.
Yeah.
You know? I just recently I did an interview on WGVU there, and she had someone that was just watching for the day, that she was just happened to be there watching.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I got done with my interview, and I got up, and she hugged me, and she said, my best friend lost her son to gang violence in Chicago. I haven't known what to do. I'm gonna listen.
Wow.
And that's huge.
yeah.
And I thought, if I don't get anybody listening to my show from
Right.
the WGVU morning
Yeah.
show, I got her.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Right? And she was going to go and listen. And so she could be a better friend,
Oh.
because she said, I just haven't known what to do.
Yeah, it's such a tough spot to be.
Oh, it is. It is.
Tell me you didn't pump your fist behind closed doors when she said that to you, because that's what your goal is. Like
Yeah.
That is.
when we
that
have
is the
something,
goal.
when somebody reaches out to us, we're like, yes,
That's
yeah.
the whole point.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's yes. Oh, that's such a cool story.
Yeah,
that
it
she
was
did that.
great. And I felt like, it wasn't chance that she
No.
happened to be there that day
Yeah,
that I
Right.
was
of
there.
all days.
Right? Of all days that she could have picked to watch,
Yeah.
to watch her.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What I love about your story is just all the different touch points where God is moving and active. And of course, we would never want things like this to happen. But
No.
the silver lining in it all is that we have a God who takes brokenness and turns it into something beautiful. And
Yeah.
that's what pulls me through the dark days, just knowing that there's still purpose and meaning and hope, even in the midst of life-altering pain.
Yeah.
There's still
This was so big for me too, that purpose.
yeah.
Because I really had felt like I lost my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I was no longer working as a pediatrician. I was no longer this mother of 3. I felt like I was a cruddy mother, because I felt like I was just so sad I couldn't be
Right.
there to support my other kids. And so I just felt like my purpose was just gone. So this has helped give a little purpose back and help me just get myself back a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I not only lost Andy, I felt like I lost me.
Yeah.
I felt like I wasn't me anymore.
your identity.
I had my identity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just being, feeling angry and all those kinds of emotions that you feel.
Yeah, no kidding. Speaking of those emotions, most of us have probably heard of the stages of grief.
Yeah, I know.
How do you feel about all those? And
You know what? It just goes all over the place.
Yeah.
It is not a process. It is not at all linear. You can feel all 5 stages of grief on the same day.
in the same minute.
In the same minute. Yeah. So I really don't like that.
Sure.
That the stages of grief. I mean, I learned about them. I was a double major in biology and psychology, so I studied all about those stages of grief. And I actually kind of thought they were dumb then, because I was going through grieving my mom. But I really feel like they are now. It's
Yeah.
just a jumbled mess. It's
It
just
is.
like everything all rolled up in one.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
It doesn't actually go in order. You fall.
No,
you slip back.
no, and you slip around all over the place. And like you said, I feel like I can feel several of them at the same moment.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And, it's just whatever. It is what it is. But
Yeah.
I know there's probably not a better thing, but
Yeah.
you just have to know it's not in any sort of order.
And that's okay.
That's
Right.
okay.
It's okay to feel everything all at once.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how it is.
It's just how it is. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's another thing about doing the podcast is for people going through the grief to just help normalize things a little bit
Yes.
and say that's okay. And also to give people hope. And that's a huge focus of mine, is to give some hope that even if we're moving forward tiny, tiny bits at a time,
Yes.
it is still a journey. And there may be some days where you feel like you've gone backwards, but that's okay. It's still this little bits at a time that things can get better and do get better, and you don't stay down at the bottom of that valley forever.
Yeah.
And I guarantee it doesn't affect me as much when I'm listening to your podcast because I haven't experienced grief like that. But each person that has that listened to it, I guarantee it. They're like, yes, that, yes. You know, when they
Yeah.
get done, they're like, yes, this is what I needed. This is what people need to do. And so
Yeah.
I think,
Well, and I had a woman write that her son had died, I think 40 days before or something. And she listened to the second episode, which is with Gwen, who is an expert on grief. She's really amazing and very encouraging. And she said, I listened to that episode with Gwen and I was able to get out of bed. And sometimes that's all you can do. That's your only accomplishment, is just getting out of bed that day. And if that's your only accomplishment, it still is an accomplishment.
yeah.
And it's something we're celebrating. And I hope that woman did celebrate the fact that she got out of bed that day. And hopefully the next day she could get out of bed and maybe do one other little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Build on it. The little
Yeah.
successes.
Yeah. Build on those successes and celebrate them as a success.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking of all the things you couldn't do today, think of those few things that you could do. And that, you know, and then trying to celebrate those and building on those day after day, instead of like, you know, I would be feeling pretty bad if I kept thinking to myself how many months I'd gone without seeing a patient, right? And how I'd not been able, you know, if I focused on, oh, I've not been bringing in income for the family, I'm disappointing all my patients. I mean, if I focus on it that way, then I'm going to start not getting out of bed.
Yep.
But instead, I have to focus on, I'm getting better for my patients. When I do come back, which now is, you know, very soon, I am going to be a better pediatrician. There's no doubt in my
Yep.
mind. I'm a
Yeah.
better person than I was. I
Absolutely.
am. I understand suffering more. I care more. I will do better than I did before.
Sure.
And when I came back the first time, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was just not in a place emotionally to give much support to anyone.
Yeah.
But now I am. And so just to celebrate those kind of things, you know, is big. And to look at it that way, instead of me looking at the time I've lost, to look at what I've been able to do in that time
Yeah.
and what I've been able to accomplish in that time and how that is making me a better person. Even though I wouldn't exchange it for Andy.
Right.
Sure.
That's understood. You don't
That's
even have
got to
to
be understood.
Yeah, like
yeah,
that's
you know, we talked in our support group this last week about how a pearl is made.
okay.
So, you know, when an oyster gets damaged, when in the process of their healing, they can make a beautiful pearl. And, you know, and so that has happened to all of us who've lost children. We have had this tear, but we can make a pearl and have good things happen from your life. And, you know, somebody asked, what do you think about that? And I said, well, I would probably still be a happier oyster if I'd have never gotten damaged. But I can still appreciate the pearl that I've been able to make.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, why don't we end there? I think it's been amazing. How can you say again how people can find your podcast? And do you do social media? I mean,
I do.
Facebook, I see, but
I do. So, yeah. So my website is andysmom.com. I am on Instagram and Twitter at Always Andy's Mom. My podcast is called Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. So you can get to it either way, typing Always Andy's Mom or Losing a Child. And you can just go to your favorite podcast player to subscribe that way. And then I've got a Facebook page, right? That's Always Andy's Mom. So it's either Always Andy's Mom or, you know, for the website, we just shorten it to Andy's Mom to make
Sure.
it easier. But
yeah.
anyway, that's how you can find me. And you can sign up for my email list, and then you get all of the, updates. And I put a blog on my website too, because I like to, in the podcast, talk about other families, you know, not just talk about my story, but talk
Right.
about other people's story.
Yeah.
But then the blog is a little more just about me.
Your story.
That's so cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you whenever the next time we record. So,
All right.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you.